The Galactic Concordance had existed for 12,000 years. It was a union of 17 different alien species, all living together in peace across thousands of star systems. They traded with each other. They shared knowledge. They built great stations in the empty spaces between worlds. And in all that time, they had never known true war. This was not because they were wise. It was not because they had learned some great lesson about peace. The truth was much simpler. Every species in the Concordance had evolved on paradise worlds. Their home planets had been gentle places with soft climates and plenty of food. Their bodies had never needed to endure great hardship. When they felt discomfort, their instincts told them to stop, and they listened. Pain, to them, was a wall they could not climb. A signal that meant only one thing: go back. Ambassador Thesic of the Valorian Hegemony had served the Concordance for 200 years. He had met representatives from every known species. He had studied their biologies, their histories, their strange customs. He considered himself an expert on alien life. So when the message came that a new species had been discovered in a distant arm of the galaxy, he was curious but not excited. New species were rare, but they were never truly surprising. They always fit the same pattern. Soft worlds made soft creatures. The humans arrived at Station Verity, on a ship that looked rough and ugly compared to the elegant vessels of the Concordance. It was covered in burn marks and patches. It looked like it had been repaired many times. Thesic watched from the observation deck as the ship docked, and he felt a small sense of pity. These creatures had clearly struggled to reach the stars. The human delegation was small. 5 of them walked through the airlock and into the greeting hall. They were bipedal, with 2 arms and 2 legs, not so different from many species in the Concordance. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink. They had hair on their heads and small eyes that moved constantly, looking at everything around them. Thesic stepped forward to greet them. The leader of the humans was a female named Sarah Chun. She was not tall, but she stood very straight, and when she shook Thesic's hand, her grip was firm. Too firm, actually. Thesic had to stop himself from pulling away. "Welcome to the Galactic Concordance," Thesic said through his translator device. "We are honored to meet a new species." Sarah Chun smiled. It was a strange expression. Thesic had learned that humans showed their teeth when they were happy, which seemed aggressive, but he had been told it was friendly. "Thank you," she said. "We've been waiting a long time to meet our neighbors." The first contact protocols took several weeks. Medical teams studied the humans. Diplomats asked them questions about their history and culture. Scientists examined their technology. And slowly, reports began to arrive on Thesic's desk. Reports that made him uncomfortable. The human body was different from anything the Concordance had ever seen, not in its shape, not in its basic functions. It was different in a way that Thesic struggled to understand at first. The humans had billions of specialized nerve cells called nociceptors, pain receptors. Their bodies were designed to feel suffering in extreme detail. Every cut, every bruise, every burn was registered and remembered by their nervous systems. Thesic read the medical reports 3 times. He called in the chief physician and asked her to explain. "It must be a mistake," he said. "No species could function with this much pain sensitivity. They would be paralyzed by any injury." The physician shook her head slowly. "The readings are accurate, Ambassador. Their nervous systems are constantly active. They feel everything, and their adrenal responses are remarkable. When they experience pain, their bodies release chemicals that actually allow them to function better for short periods. Their heart rate increases. Their muscles grow stronger. Their minds become more focused." "That makes no sense," Thesic said. "Pain is a warning to stop, to retreat, to heal. For us, yes, the physician said. But for them, it seems to be something else entirely. A tool, perhaps. Or a teacher. Desick dismissed this idea. He wrote in his official report that humans were an evolutionary curiosity, a species that had somehow survived despite their cruel biology, not because of it. He recommended provisional membership in the Concordance, noting that humans were technologically advanced enough to be useful trading partners, but too biologically limited to ever be truly important. The Council accepted his recommendation. Humanity was welcomed into the Concordance with little ceremony. Most species barely noticed. Humans were just another small member of a vast community, interesting only for their strange medical readings and their habit of smiling with their teeth. Desick returned to his normal duties. He attended meetings and wrote reports and negotiated trade agreements. He forgot about the humans almost entirely. When he saw them at diplomatic functions, he was polite but distant. He noticed odd things about them sometimes. The way they kept working when they should have rested. The way they laughed when they injured themselves in minor accidents. The way they talked casually about breaking bones and cutting themselves. Once, at a formal dinner, Desick saw a human waiter drop a heavy tray on his own foot. The tray was made of metal, and the impact must have been painful. Any Valorian would have collapsed, would have called for medical attention, would have needed days to recover from the shock. The human waiter picked up the tray, apologized to the guests, and continued working. He was limping, but he was working. Desick watched him for the rest of the evening. The human never stopped, never complained, never even sat down. Desick mentioned this to Sarah Chun at a later meeting. He expected her to apologize for her species' strange behavior. Instead, she laughed. "He probably broke a toe," she said. "It happens. You just walk it off. Walk it off." Desick did not understand the phrase. His translator offered several meanings, none of which made sense. How could you walk off a broken bone? How could you simply ignore that kind of damage? "Does it not hurt?" he asked. "Oh, it hurts," Sarah Chun said. Her smile was strange, knowing. "It hurts a lot, but that's just pain. Pain is just information. It tells you something is wrong. It doesn't tell you to stop." Desick thought about this conversation for a long time afterward. He still did not understand. He believed that humans were simply strange, perhaps even a little broken. He pitied them for their suffering. He did not know what was coming. He did not understand that he had just witnessed the first hint of something terrifying. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. On Earth, children fell down and scraped their knees. They cried for a moment and then they stood back up. Soldiers trained until their muscles screamed, and then they trained more. Doctors cut into living bodies to save lives, forcing themselves to work through their own horror and exhaustion. Athletes pushed themselves until they vomited, until their joints ached, until their lungs burned like fire. And every single one of them learned the same ancient lesson that humanity had been learning for 4 billion years. Pain was not the end. Pain was not defeat. Pain was just the voice of a harsh teacher, demanding that its students become stronger. The Concordance had never faced a true threat, because no species in the galaxy could endure one. But in the darkness between stars, something was waking. Something that felt nothing at all. And when it came, the soft species of the Concordance would learn what humans had always known. Pain was coming for everyone. The only question was whether you could survive its lessons. The warning came from the outer rim of the galaxy, from a small monitoring station that had been watching empty space for 3,000 years. The station was staffed by Valorians, and they were the first to die. The message they sent before the end was short. Unknown vessels. Thousands of them. They are not responding to communication. They are not, then nothing. Ambassador Desick was in a meeting when the news arrived. He watched the recording of the final transmission with growing horror. The monitoring station had been armed. It had shields. It had a crew of 200 trained personnel. And it had been destroyed in less than 4 minutes. The Concordants had not fought a war in 11,000 years. They had protocols for conflict, but no one truly believed they would ever be used. When the Council of Species assembled in emergency session, the Essex saw fear on every face. Not the sharp, focused fear that leads to action. A soft, paralyzed fear that leads to nothing at all. "We must negotiate," said the representative from the Coal Union. "Every species can be reasoned with." "We must flee," said another. "We cannot fight what we cannot understand." "We must wait," said a third. "Perhaps they will pass us by." No one suggested fighting. No one even considered it. The idea of standing against an enemy that would cause pain was unthinkable. Their bodies would not allow it. Their instincts would override their will. They would retreat, surrender, submit anything to make the suffering stop. The invaders were called the Veth. This name was discovered later, from captured records and intercepted communications. The Veth were a hive mind species. Billions of individuals connected to a single vast intelligence. They had evolved in the darkness between galaxies, in conditions so harsh that only creatures without feeling could survive. They had no pain receptors, no fear response, no hesitation circuits in their strange crystalline brains. They did not conquer for resources. They did not conquer for territory. They conquered because they could. Because the act of consumption was the only thing that gave their existence meaning. They had stripped a dozen galaxies before reaching the Concordants, and they expected this one to fall just as easily. For the first 3 months, they were right. The Concordance's combined fleet was the largest military force ever assembled by the member species. 12,000 ships, crewed by the best officers from 17 worlds. They met the Veth at the edge of the frontier zone, and the battle lasted exactly 2 hours. It was not that the Concordant ships were weak. Their weapons were powerful. Their shields were strong. Their tactics were sound. But the moment the fighting began, the moment crew members started to die, and the survivors felt the shock of loss and injury, everything fell apart. Officers abandoned their posts when the pain became too great. Soldiers dropped their weapons and curled into protective balls. Pilots flew their ships away from the battle, their bodies overriding their minds. The Veth did not even slow down. Admiral Yevon, commander of the combined fleet, sent his final message to every species in the Concordance. "We cannot fight them. We do not know how to continue when it hurts. If there is any hope, it must come from somewhere else. It must come from someone who understands suffering in a way that we do not." On Earth, this message was received in a small conference room at the United Nations headquarters. The people in that room were quiet for a long time after the recording ended. They looked at each other with expressions that the aliens of the Concordance would not have understood. It was not fear, exactly. It was something harder, something older. Commander Raya Chun stood up. She was 43 years old. She had served in 3 wars on Earth before joining the diplomatic mission to the Concordance. She had been shot twice, stabbed once, and had survived a building collapse that killed 6 of her team members. Her body carried scars that mapped her history, and she wore them without shame. "They're asking for our help," she said. "They're admitting they can't win," said General Morrison. The senior military officer present. Same thing. Raya walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Billions of humans going about their lives, unaware that the galaxy was falling. They don't understand pain the way we do. They think it's a stop sign. They think it's an ending. And what do we think it is? Asked the Secretary-General. Raya turned back to face the room. Her expression was calm, but there was fire in her eyes. "Pain is not our enemy," she said. "It's our instructor. It's been teaching us since the first human ancestor stood up on two legs and decided to keep walking even when every muscle screamed at them to stop." She looked at each person in the room, one by one. "The galaxy is about to learn what humans have always known. Pain doesn't stop us. It teaches us. And we are very, very good students." The mobilization of the human military was unlike anything the Concordance had ever witnessed. Within 3 weeks, 200,000 human soldiers were moving toward the front lines. They traveled in ships that seemed primitive compared to Concordance technology, but those ships were tough, built to survive, built by a species that expected things to go wrong and planned accordingly. Ambassador Desic was now a refugee, his homeworld occupied by the Veth. He had been rescued by a human cruiser and was being transported to a safe zone when he first saw human soldiers preparing for combat. They were in the ship's cargo bay, checking their weapons and their armor. Desic watched through an observation window, fascinated and disturbed. The soldiers were laughing, joking with each other, slapping each other on the back and shoulders in displays of physical contact that seemed almost violent. One soldier cut his hand while adjusting his knife. Blood flowed, red and bright. Desic expected the soldier to stop, to call for a medic, to retreat. Instead, the man wrapped a cloth around his hand and kept working. His companions made jokes about his clumsiness. He made a rude gesture and laughed. Desic felt ill. These creatures were damaged, broken. They did not respond to injury the way any sane being should respond. And yet they were going to war against an enemy that had destroyed the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Commander Chun found him at the observation window an hour later. She stood beside him and watched her soldiers without speaking. Her presence was strange to Desic. She was calm in a way that felt unnatural, like a predator at rest. "You think we're going to lose," she said. It was not a question. "I do not understand how you can win," Desic admitted. "The Veth do not feel pain. They cannot be intimidated by suffering. And your species—" He stopped, uncertain how to continue without causing offense. "Our species feels everything," Raya finished for him. "Every cut, every burn, every broken bone. Yes, that's true." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you know what the difference is, Ambassador, between us and you?" Desic shook his head. "You feel pain and you stop. Your bodies tell you to stop and you listen. You obey." Raya's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. "We feel pain and we keep going. Not because we don't feel it. We feel all of it. But we have learned, over millions of years, that pain is not the truth. Pain is just fear wearing a physical mask. And fear is a liar." She turned to face him directly. "The Veth can't feel anything. They think that makes them strong. But pain is what taught us to be strong. Pain is what taught us to work together, to protect each other, to never give up even when everything inside us screams to surrender." Her eyes were hard and bright. "The Veth have never faced an enemy that understands suffering the way we do. They've never faced an enemy that uses pain as fuel instead of being stopped by it." Desic felt something shift inside him. It was not understanding, exactly. It was the beginning of understanding. The first crack in his certainty that humans were simply broken creatures who had survived by accident. "What happens now?" he asked. Raya Chun smiled. It was the same teeth-showing expression that Desic had first found so aggressive. But now, for the first time, he saw what was really behind it. Not aggression. Something more terrifying. Determination. "Now," she said, "we show the galaxy what pain really taught us." The first human battle against the Veth happened 3 days later. It was a small engagement, just a few ships on each side, testing each other's strength. The Veth expected the humans to break like all the others. They expected fear and retreat and surrender. Instead, they found something they had never encountered in 100 galaxies of conquest. They found an enemy that would not stop. The Battle of Kethris Station was the first time the Veth retreated. It was not a large victory. A single station defended, a few hundred enemy vessels destroyed. But for the Concordance, it was something they had never seen before. It was proof that the Veth could be stopped. Ambassador Thesic watched the battle recordings in his quarters aboard the human carrier Endurance. He watched them again and again, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human ships were outnumbered. Their technology was not superior. Their tactics were good, but not exceptional. Yet somehow, impossibly, they had won. He paused the recording at a key moment. A human fighter craft, badly damaged, its hull torn open to space. By every measure, the pilot should have been dead or disabled. Instead, the small ship continued its attack run, crashing directly into a Veth command vessel and destroying it. The pilot had been alive until the moment of impact, had chosen to die. Thesic could not understand this. His species had words for sacrifice, but they were abstract concepts. No Valorian had ever actually done such a thing. No Valorian body would allow it. The pain and fear would have made it impossible. He requested a meeting with Commander Chen. She arrived an hour later, still wearing her uniform from the bridge. There was a fresh bandage on her left arm. She noticed him looking at it and shrugged. "Small accident," she said. "One of the console panels exploded during the battle." "Should you not be in medical?" Thesic asked. "Already went. They cleaned it, wrapped it. I'll be fine." She sat down across from him. "You wanted to talk?" Thesic struggled to find the right words. He had prepared questions, but now they seemed inadequate. "How?" he finally asked. "How do you do this? How do you continue when your bodies must be screaming at you to stop?" Raya was quiet for a moment. She looked at the frozen image on his screen, the damaged fighter in its final attack. "That was Lieutenant Torres," she said softly. "I knew him. Good pilot. Good man. He had a daughter back on Earth. And he chose to die," Thesic said. "While injured. While in pain. How is this possible? Do you know how humans learn to hunt?" Raya asked. The question seemed unrelated, but Thesic shook his head and waited. "We were not the fastest animals on our planet. Not the strongest. We had no claws or fangs or venom. But we could do something that no other creature could do. We could run for hours without stopping. Days, if necessary." She leaned forward. "Our ancestors would choose an animal and simply follow it. Not chase it, just follow. The animal would run away, fast, and our ancestors would walk after it. The animal would stop to rest, and our ancestors would keep coming. Hour after hour. The animal would run again, but it was tired now. Our ancestors were tired too. Their legs burned. Their lungs ached. Their feet bled. But they kept walking." Thesic felt it chill. "They ignored the pain." "No," Raya said. "They listened to it. Pain told them their bodies were being pushed to the limit. Pain told them exactly how much more they could endure before real damage occurred. And they walked right up to that edge and stayed there for hours until the animal finally collapsed from exhaustion." She touched the bandage on her arm absently. "That is what pain taught us, Ambassador. Not to stop. Pain taught us exactly how far we could go. Pain taught us our own limits, and then we spent millions of years learning to push past them." Thesic thought about this. He thought about his own species, how they'd have evolved on a world where food was plentiful and predators were rare. They had never needed to endure. They had never learned to use their suffering as a tool. "Lieutenant Torres," he said slowly. He knew he was dying. Yes. He felt the pain of his injuries. Yes. And he chose to continue anyway. Raya's expression was sad, but proud. Pain told him he was hurt. But pain did not tell him to give up. It never does, not really. Pain is just information. Torres decided what to do with that information. He decided that stopping the Veth was more important than stopping his own suffering. She stood and walked to the window. Stars drifted past, cold and distant. Do you know how human medicine began? She asked. Our earliest doctors had to learn about bodies by cutting open the dead. They had to overcome their natural horror and disgust to understand how flesh and bone worked. Later, they performed surgery on the living. They had to cause terrible pain in order to heal. Desik remembered the medical reports about humans. Their bodies were designed to feel everything. Surgery without pain-blocking technology must have been unspeakable. Before we had medicine to numb the pain, Raya continued, surgeons had to hold patients down while they cut. The patient screamed. The surgeons had to ignore those screams and keep cutting, because stopping meant death. Pain taught us to work through horror, through suffering, through the worst moments imaginable, because the alternative was worse. You learned to cause pain, Desik said slowly, in order to prevent greater pain. Yes, and that taught us something else. Something perhaps more important. Raya turned back to face him. We learned empathy. Because we know exactly what pain feels like, we understand what others feel. When another human suffers, we do not look away. We cannot look away. Their pain echoes in our own bodies, in our own memories. So we build entire civilizations around reducing suffering, not by avoiding it, by facing it and fighting it. Desik was beginning to understand. The humans were not broken. They were not victims of their own biology. They had taken something that should have been a weakness and transformed it into their greatest strength. Your art, he said. Your music and stories. They are often about sadness, about loss. Our greatest works come from pain, Raya agreed. A human who has never suffered cannot create truly moving art. We need to know darkness to appreciate light. We need to feel loss to understand love. She smiled softly. Pain gave us beauty, Ambassador. It gave us the capacity to find meaning in suffering, to transform hurt into something lasting and true. A communication signal interrupted them. Raya checked her device, and her expression hardened. The Veth are attacking Frontier Station 7, she said. 2,000 enemy ships. The station has requested reinforcement. 2,000? Desik felt his hope crumble. That is too many. Even for your species. Raya was already moving toward the door. We will not win every battle, she said. We will lose ships. We will lose people. We will feel every death, every injury, every loss. And then we will get up and keep fighting. She paused at the doorway. Pain is a teacher, Ambassador. And humanity has been attending its lessons since before we were human. The Veth are strong because they feel nothing. But we are stronger because we feel everything and we fight anyway. Desik watched her go. Then he looked at the frozen image on his screen. Lieutenant Torres, moments before his death. A human who had felt the full weight of his suffering and had chosen to keep going anyway. He thought about his own species. About how they had always given up when things became difficult. About how they had never learned the lessons that pain could teach. And he wondered, for the first time, if perhaps humans were not the damaged ones after all. Perhaps, he thought, my species is the one that was never finished. We were never forced to become complete. The next battle was worse than anything Desik could have imagined. The human fleet lost over 200 ships. Thousands of soldiers died. The survivors came back bloody and broken and exhausted. Some of them were crying. Many of them were injured. All of them were in pain, and then they repaired their ships, treated their wounds, mourned their dead, and went back to fight again. Desik watched them and finally understood what Commander Chun had been trying to tell him. Pain was not the enemy. Pain was the harsh teacher that had forged humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that could not be broken. Something that would not stop. HFY War lasted 3 years. In that time, the galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Species that had known only peace learned what it meant to fight. Worlds that had never seen violence became battlefields. And through it all, humanity stood at the front lines, bleeding and dying and refusing to surrender. The final battle took place above a world called Vithris Prime, the heart of the invaders' territory. The human fleet had pushed deep into enemy space, taking losses at every step. By the time they reached the HFY homeworld, they had lost nearly half their ships. The soldiers who remained were exhausted. Many were wounded. All of them had watched friends die. Admiral Raya Chun stood on the bridge of the carrier Endurance and looked at the enemy formation on her tactical display. 10,000 HFY ships, 3 times their number. By any reasonable calculation, the humans should retreat, should wait for reinforcements, should preserve their remaining forces. She gave the order to attack. The battle lasted 18 hours. It was the largest engagement in the history of the galaxy. Human ships threw themselves against the HFY defenses again and again, taking terrible damage, losing crew members by the hundreds. And still they came. Wave after wave. Attack after attack. Ambassador Desik watched from the observation deck. He had refused to be evacuated with the other refugees. He had asked to stay, to see what happened, to understand. Now he stood at the window and watched human ships burning in the void. Watched escape pods tumbling through space. Watched medics working frantically to save the wounded, even as the ship shook from enemy fire. A young human soldier stood nearby, his arm in a sling, his face covered in burn marks. He should have been in medical. Instead, he was watching the battle with fierce attention. "Why are you here?" Desik asked him. "You are injured. You cannot fight." The soldier looked at him with eyes that held pain and exhaustion and something else. Something bright and unbreakable. "My friends are out there," he said. "My family. I can't help them fight, but I can watch. I can witness. I can remember." Desik did not understand at first. Then, slowly, he began to see. Humans did not turn away from suffering. They faced it. They held it. They honored those who endured it by refusing to look away. "The pain of watching," Desik said slowly. "That is also a form of sacrifice." The soldier nodded. Everything worth doing involves pain, learning, growing, loving, creating, fighting for what matters. He winced as the ship shook from another impact. Pain is just the price we pay for being alive, for caring about things. The HFY don't understand that because they can't feel anything. They think they're strong because nothing hurts them. But they're empty. They fight because they have nothing else. We fight because we have everything to lose, and losing things hurts more than anything. The battle turned 3 hours later. The HFY, who had never faced an enemy that would not break, made a mistake. They assumed the human fleet would retreat when their losses reached a certain point. They concentrated their forces for a killing blow, expecting the humans to run. The humans did not run. They charged into the concentrated enemy formation and tore it apart from the inside. It was a maneuver that cost them dearly. Hundreds more ships lost. Thousands more lives gone. But the HFY command structure was shattered. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the HFY began to retreat. Not because they were afraid, they could not feel fear, but because their calculations told them that this enemy was different. This enemy would not stop no matter how much damage they took. This enemy would keep coming until either the Veth were destroyed or the humans were extinct. And the Veth, in their cold and logical way, calculated that they would run out of ships before the humans ran out of will. The war ended 3 months later. The Veth withdrew from Concordance space, abandoning their conquests, retreating into the dark between galaxies. They had lost half their fleet and gained nothing. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something they could not consume. The celebration on Station Verity was muted. Too many had died. Too many worlds had been damaged. The victory felt hollow to many of the concordant species, who could not truly understand what had been won or how, but Desic understood now. He stood before the Council of Species and gave the speech that would be remembered for generations. "I pitied them," he said, his voice carrying through the great hall. "When the humans first arrived, I pitied them. I saw their pain receptors and thought they were cursed. I saw their capacity for suffering and thought they were broken. I was wrong." He paused, looking at the human delegation seated in the gallery. Admiral Chun was there, her uniform still bearing the marks of the final battle. She had refused to change before the ceremony. She said she wanted to remember. "Pain is a teacher," Desic continued. "The humans have been saying this since they arrived, and we did not listen. We could not listen. Our bodies never learned the lessons that pain can teach. We evolved in comfort, and comfort made us weak." He turned to face the full council. The humans evolved in fire. Their world was harsh. Their history was brutal. They fought each other, fought their environment, fought their own limitations. And every moment of suffering taught them something. Pain taught them medicine, how to cut open bodies to save lives, how to work through horror because the alternative was death. Pain taught them endurance, how to keep running when every muscle screamed for rest. Pain taught them empathy, how to feel the suffering of others and work to reduce it. Pain taught them art, how to transform loss into beauty. His voice rose. Pain taught them to fight, not because they enjoy it, not because they are cruel, but because they learned, over millions of years, that sometimes the only way to end suffering is to walk toward it, to face it, to endure it long enough to find a solution. Admiral Chun rose from her seat. The room fell silent. She walked down to stand beside Desic, and the two of them faced the council together. "We are not special," she said. "We are not chosen. We are simply a species that was never allowed to be soft. Our world hurt us, constantly, and we had two choices: learn from the pain or die. We learned." She looked around the room at the representatives of 17 species. "You can learn too. Not quickly, not easily. But pain is not the enemy. Fear of pain is the enemy. Fear makes you stop before you have to. Fear makes you give up when there is still hope. Fear made the Concordance surrender to the Veth before the first shot was fired." She held up her hand. It was scarred, burned, calloused from years of fighting and working. These hands have felt more pain than most of you can imagine. And these hands have also built things, healed things, created things. Pain and creation are not opposites. They are partners. You cannot have one without the other. The council was silent for a long time after she finished speaking. Then, slowly, the representative from the co-union stood. She was old. Her carapace faded with age, but her voice was clear. "We would like to learn," she said. "Will you teach us?" Admiral Chun smiled. It was the same teeth-showing expression that had once seemed so aggressive to Desic. Now he understood it perfectly. It was the smile of someone who had faced darkness and come through the other side. "We have been trying to teach everyone since we first arrived," she said. "Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the teacher. And the lesson it teaches is simple. You are stronger than you think. You can endure more than you believe. You can keep going when everything inside you screams to stop. She looked at Desik. The galaxy called us broken because we feel everything. But feeling everything is what made us whole. Our pain made us human. And humanity, real humanity, is not about avoiding suffering. It is about choosing what is worth suffering for. 1 year later, Desik stood on the surface of Valorian Prime for the first time since the war. The world was healing. Buildings were being rebuilt. Gardens were being replanted. And in the central plaza, a human artist was finishing a monument to the fallen. Nearby, a Valorian child tripped and scraped her knee. She began to cry, the pain overwhelming her system the way it always did for her species. Her mother rushed forward, ready to carry her away, to comfort her, to make the pain stop. But before she reached her daughter, a human child stepped forward. She was small, with dark hair and serious eyes. She knelt beside the Valorian child and spoke quietly. "It hurts," she said. "I know, but it's okay. Pain is just your body talking to you. It's saying be careful, but it's not saying give up. Watch." She pointed to a scar on her own knee. I fell too. It hurt a lot, but I got back up. And now the pain is gone, but I'm still here. You'll be okay. You're stronger than you think. The Valorian child looked at her with wide eyes. Then, slowly, she stopped crying. She looked at her scraped knee. She looked at the human child's scar. And then, with a shaky breath, she stood up. Desik watched this small moment and felt something shift in his chest. It was not pain, exactly. It was the feeling of something growing. Something new. Something that hurt a little like all growth does. Admiral Chun appeared beside him. She was out of uniform now, dressed in simple civilian clothes. She looked tired but peaceful. "That's your daughter?" Desik asked, nodding toward the human child. "Yes, Maya, she's 7. She is already teaching." Chun smiled. "We all are. Every day. Every time we fall down and get back up. Every time we face something difficult and keep going." She put her hand on Desik's shoulder. "That's the real lesson, Ambassador. Not that pain is good. Pain is terrible. But running from pain makes you weak. Facing it makes you strong." Desik watched the 2 children, one human, one Valorian, walk together toward the playground. The Valorian child was still limping slightly, but she was walking. She had learned her first lesson. "The galaxy was soft," Desik said. "We grew in comfort and learned nothing." "Yes, but you grew in fire. And you learned everything." Chun shook her head. "Not everything. Just enough. Just the lessons that pain could teach us." She looked at the monument in the plaza, the names of the fallen carved in stone. Love, courage, persistence, sacrifice, empathy, hope. Pain taught us all of those things. And now we're teaching them to you. Desik thought about his own people, about how they had always fled from suffering, always sought the easy path. And he thought about what they might become if they learned to face their pain instead of running from it. The galaxy had called, humanity broken, but humanity had answered, "No, we are forged." And now, slowly, painfully, beautifully, the galaxy was learning to be forged too.